Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Rachel.
And we're in debt.
We are in debt.
Because
we're deadbeats.
Losers.
We care more about dancing than making money.
Actually, we've struggled with money because
most people do.
I never thought anybody was in credit card debt like me.
And that's what this podcast is all about.
The first season of Deadheads explores the insidious political and economic policies.
Do you know what your interest rate is?
As well as the seismic but elusive cultural shift.
You know, I'll buy like a tote bag and go, why the hell do I need another tote bag?
That have defined America over the last 4 decades.
Just being alive is expensive. I'm getting priced out of living in America.
Deadheads will make you laugh till you cry.
Or cry until you laugh.
And it's out now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, beautiful listeners. As we wrap up another season of the podcast soon, I want to hear from you. What's working, what's not, and what you want more or less of next season. So we're running an anonymous audience survey and the chance for you to win $50 in cash. This show exists because of our incredible listeners and our sponsors. And sponsors care a lot about who you are and what you want. And so do I. Your answers help keep this show financially afloat and help me make sure I'm creating the sex ed you actually need, not just what I think is interesting or helpful. This show is about education, access, pleasure, and filling in the massive gaps that most of us were left with growing up. And the show is best when it reflects your questions, curiosities, and lived experiences. The audience survey takes just under 5 minutes, and it's open from January 21st, 2026 to February 4th, 2026. And to say thank you, 2 lucky people will each win $50 in cash via Venmo, Zelle, or PayPal. You'll find the link to the audience survey in the show notes. Those 5 minutes make a huge difference for me and the team, and I'd be so grateful for your feedback. Thank you so much for being here. We are constantly told to hydrate, sleep 8 hours, journal, do yoga, take care of yourself, but almost nobody says this part out loud. Pleasure is care too. I helped lead a scientific study with more than 1,000 participants looking at daily magic wand use and how it relates to stress, emotional well-being, sleep, confidence, even how connected people felt in their relationships. What we saw was simple. Consistent pleasure can be grounding, calming, regulating. Vibrators like the magic wand are real tools for wellness. If you want to see the findings, go to magicwandstudy.com and give yourself permission to actually feel good. Hello, and welcome back to Sex Ed with DB. I, of course, am DB, your favorite sex educator and pleasure expert, and today we are talking about being a late bloomer queer person, navigating what it is like to come out and all the pleasure that comes after. This week, we're joined by the incredible Eva Bloom. Eva is a queer and trans late bloomer coach, community facilitator, and inclusive sex ed speaker who helps adults come into their queerness with confidence. And Eva is themselves a late bloomer lesbian and non-binary person with their own personal experience to share, and tons of research and knowledge from working with queer communities. In this conversation, we talk about concepts like comphet or compulsive heterosexuality, the importance of community when navigating who you are as a queer person, and yes, once again and forever, we are talking about Heated Rivalry, which is a show about a late bloomer gay man. If you haven't listened to our episode on this show with Lena Dune about Heated Rivalry, definitely go give that a listen. And one thing we touch on in this episode is the pleasure of slowing down. So I gotta ask, do you listen to this podcast on 1.5x speed? Do you trim the silences? We are trying to get to know our audience better and learn your habits and what you like and don't like. So please check out our listener survey linked in the show notes. It helps so much more than you can imagine to have information on all of you. And it's anonymous. And 2 winners will win $50 cash. So don't miss out on this opportunity. This is how we can keep making the show, is by learning what you like and what you want more of. Now, let's dive into this amazing conversation with Eva Bloom. Hello, Eva Bloom. Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. How are you today?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it is my pleasure. As I said to you before we started recording, I've been following your stuff on Instagram for a very long time, and you're a very talented content creator. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you so much. I know.
Yeah.
I feel like the sex ed world is small and we're just like on other ends of just the world being like,
Yeah.
go
We
do
both
that thing.
have our hands up,
Yeah.
kind of in party mode.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm thrilled to talk to you today specifically about late bloomer queer folks. We have had an episode about late bloomer lesbianism with Elena Joy on in the past. And that was one of our, honestly, like most listened to episodes. I think there is a lot to learn about ourselves later in life. And there's this idea that, oh, we're supposed to know everything in the beginning. And we're here today to dispel some of those myths and to educate folks about late bloomer queerness.
Yay. I'm so excited. Yeah. It is so real that like there is such a narrow representation still of like what a queer coming out journey can look like. And the reality is that like there are so many different like options and like experiences that can influence that.
100%. And we're going to get into those really soon. But quick, we're going to start with the quick and dirty. Quick. What am I saying? Right quick. We're going to start with the quick and dirty. Late bloomer edition. This is our rapid fire segment where we get to know our expert with bold questions, honest answers, and in this case, just enough spice to get us going. And I'd love to hear kind of either one word or one sentence answers. This is going to be hard, but we'll revisit some of these later. What is one quick way that someone can know that they might be queer?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, one way that somebody know they might be queer that I've noticed in a lot of clients is if all your friends are queer, if you just feel most like yourself around queer people or gravitate to queer people. Might be an opportunity to look inward.
You might be queer.
Yeah.
That's good. Like if you feel very at home in those spaces, that might be a cutie sign that you want to look out for. That's really good. What's the number one reason in your experience of working with folks that someone might not realize they're queer until later in life?
I think a lot of it comes down to representation and just like expectations around good womanhood. I will say in quotes, good womanhood, that, yeah, if you don't see any positive representation of lesbians growing up, you only see examples of them being conniving or homewreckers or angry, then you're like, that's not who I am. And you're like, I want to be a good woman and a good community member. And the only way that's been modeled to me is heterosexuality. So I'm going to lock in and do that.
Wow. We're getting into the meat already. That's really good. Yeah, you have a lot of comp het stuff in your programs and in your content, and we'll definitely revisit that. But that's really, really good. Representation, I think like religion would be my one word answer to that, maybe. I'm just everywhere in the world, and namely, in the US for sure, very religious Christian country. So if you don't feel safe or like you're able to actually access that identity because of safety, that might be a reason as well.
Totally.
What's one thing that you think everyone who comes out later in life can do for their own pleasure?
Ooh, I love that. I will say this a million times and I'll say it again. Yes. Read some little gay books.
Read gay books.
Read some sweetie books of like, and especially too late bloomer books, like read stories of people coming out in their 30s and 40s and like having a happy ending.
Yes. Oh, wow. I did recently, like I said, I look at a lot of your content. I feel like you put out a lot of book rec lists. So maybe after this interview, I'll get a list from you and we can link it in the show notes.
Absolutely, can do.
Amazing. Okay, last question of the quick and dirty. What is one resource that you'd send to someone who is a late bloomer, who comes out late in life?
as a number one resource, I should know it off the top of my head. But there is a really good memoir that I read this year. That some of the late bloomer memoirs can be kind of sad because there can be a lot of grief in the process, and like there can be sadness. But I found that this memoir gave a really balanced approach of like those sad moments and those moments of like, levity. And like, you can have this idea of like, this is the worst thing that could happen. And like, that's not how it goes. Sometimes, people surprise you in like the most like generous, like, beautiful ways. So I've just looked it up, and it's called Perfectly Queer by Jillian Abbey.
Perfectly Queer. Wow. Okay. Perfectly Queer. Yeah, I feel like reading people's personal stories about the way in which they come out, they have relationships, makes people feel less alone in their experiences and things that might feel weird or strange, or like no one else has gone through this. I always say this on this podcast, but we interviewed an author named Rachel Feltman, who wrote a book called Been There, Done That, A Rousing History of Sex. And what she said on our episode was, if you think that what you like to do, your kink, your fetish, your sexual act is strange, someone has already done it.
Yes.
And I love that idea for applying it to folks who come out later in life. Like, you are not the first, you will not be the last, you're in good company.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, with sex ed too, like shame thrives in like isolation and like keeping that stuff to yourself. So being able to find community or like see other examples like can really dispel that.
Yes. Yes. Oh, wow. Eva, you're such a calm presence. I really love everything that we're talking about already, and we're 5 minutes in here.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was your personal coming out journey like? When did you realize you were queer? What did that process look like for you?
Yeah, I had so many coming outs. I came out initially as bi when there was, this woman where I was like, okay, oh shit, this is romantic attraction. And I did so much minimizing around previous sexual experiences I had had because, in the patriarchy, we get all these messages about women are just more inherently sexually fluid, and like, it's still straight if you like want to kiss girls and like have sex, but which that's not true. Straight women don't want to fuck other women, just in case you were wondering.
They might want to watch lesbian porn, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested in engaging in that act. Could be just a fantasy, it could be a little muddy, but that's correct in that when it comes to the real life, maybe they don't actually want to do that.
It's true. Just as much as I'm watching the new gay hockey show coming out, gay male hockey, I'm looking at those butts. Do I want to touch those butts in real life? No, but I like looking at them. We're staring. I'm a lesbian staring at those gay butts.
Right.
but that was kind of a pivotal moment where I was like, I can't deny this like romantic attraction. And then from there, it was like a 5-year process of unlearning compulsory heterosexuality. Unlearning I had just assumed that, of course, I must be into men. That's just, what is it? My factory setting, I guess. When I was born, that's what was handed to me. Right. And then being like, wait. I think I've been assuming wrong the whole time. Wow. I think the way I feel around queer people, like the way my attraction feels, the way the relationships feel is different. And I think I'm more interested in how fun it is to be liked by men, and like, it's fun to flirt with anybody of any gender.
Right. That's true.
And like companionship is nice with somebody of any gender. But when it comes to like, how does my body react? How does those relationships feel? I am a lesbian. And so I came out in 2021 as a lesbian, and then also non-binary, because that unlearning process also led us to some explorations around gender too.
Wow. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. That is incredible. I know that there are so many people who are listening who are like, that feels familiar to me. And I love this idea of the factory setting of like maybe getting a hard reset and doing the questioning. But I would love to hear about your late bloomer support club. And what is it? Tell me a little bit about what you do in that club. What does it look like? What do your teachings look like? Tell me everything.
Yeah, so I run two different kind of community spaces for people who are late bloomers. We have the Late Bloomer Support Club, which is really about queer joy and community, like that shame piece of like, let's just get ya, like, because most queer people like are late bloomers. You can feel even isolated from the larger queer community. So people who've been out for like decades, people who like kind of always knew they were queer, and you can feel even isolated going into a queer space for the first time. So the Late Bloomer Support Club is really about being like, let's find other late bloomer community specifically, and, get advice and like have a laugh and like, have some joy along this like tumultuous process. And then I also run Queer Enough, which is a more in-depth transformation that's like 8 weeks where we really like dive in and unpack like, okay, what are the different ways that assumptions that were straight and cis growing up, like how did that get in the way of coming into our authentic selves?
Wow. And how many people are in these groups?
So the Late Bloomer Support Club is a little bit bigger. We have people kind of flowing in and out. We have a Discord. I'd say we usually have about like 15 people on like our monthly calls. And then Queer Enough is a little bit more intimate. I would say it's around like 10 people per call and like smaller breakout rooms where you really get a chance to like, it's so cool to like people who come to Queer Enough are often at like different points in that journey. And it's so cool to see like to get to talk to somebody who's like, oh, that's someone's 2 steps further down than me. Or like we have commonalities in this way, but also like differences in this way. And really get to like form those deep friendships is really beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, community is everything for everyone, but especially for queer people and especially for later in life queer people, because I feel like there's so much questioning of identity that's happening and trying to figure out like, do labels feel good for me? Am I attracted to these folks? What does it mean if I've never had an experience? Like, do I want to have experiences? And it can feel like you're in middle school again in a sense. So I feel like it's extra important to have people who can hold you in those moments of feeling unsure.
Yeah. And I think like there can be this fear of going into general queer spaces that there will be this gatekeeping or checklist where it's like, okay, I need to know my label before I go to this party, or like, I need to like, I don't know, somebody's going to ask for my credentials. And like, in reality, I think people over exaggerate that fear in their minds. Like nobody's really cares that much about, like nobody's asking for your credentials, but I think it can be an added comfort to be like, oh, I'm going to go in a space where I don't have to explain what this has been like for me. Nobody's going to be like, well, why did you have a husband and now you're a lesbian? Everybody will be like, yeah, that tracks. Me too, bestie.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Can we talk briefly? I'm curious to hear your take on the Am I a Lesbian Master Doc? I'm curious, what could you explain? What is this and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So the Am I a Lesbian Master Doc was a Google document, many pages of a lovely person kind of explaining the idea of compulsory heterosexuality, which is basically like the factory settings, like I said, that when we're born, we're assumed to be cis and straight, and that our current society also like rewards cisness and straightness in like social status and access, and penalizes queerness and transness. So moving through the world with that lens, especially like in a gendered way, where if you are not a man, you are also like battling against like other different forms of oppression. a lot of people literally don't realize that they are queer or lesbian. It's not that they're like in the closet and suppressing. It's literally not something that like they've been able to like understand for themselves. And the lesbian master doc is a huge part of it is a list of questions kind of helping you interrogate like what is social conditioning and what is authentic to you. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And do you recommend it to folks, or do you have problems with it, or do you like it, or is it complicated? Tell me your feelings about it.
Yeah, I mean, I am really grateful that like it helped popularize conversations about compulsory heterosexuality. I'm really glad that a lot of people found it supportive. I think the idea of reflecting on, this idea of when was I doing what I was expected to do and what feels like true to me. But I don't think that the master doc is like prescriptive. I don't think it's like an "Are you gay?" quiz. Like, I think, yeah, it's helpful for some people and also not helpful for other people.
Like, it's an educational piece of material that we should use maybe as a jumping off point for other conversations and to think more deeply about your personal experience.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, agreed. I'm glad that it exists. And all right, I wanna dive deeper into some of the quick and dirty questions now. In your kind of, educating and studies, but in your feeling generally, these clubs are full that you're putting on. Like, people are coming out of the woodwork being like, yeah, maybe me, right? So it's more common than you think. Is that what you would say?
Yeah. And I think it's the thing of like, that graph of like left-handedness of like over time.
Right.
We see this huge spike in people who are left-handed. And it's like, why did a bunch of people get born left-handed? It's like, no, they stopped beating the shit out of people who were left-handed.
Right.
So it's like,
for being quote unquote sinister.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, why are all these like people coming out as like late bloomer queer folks? It's because like every little bit of extra representation, every little bit of, messaging that tells us that it's not shameful, that you can live a happy life, like all of that adds up to somebody else being able to be like, oh, maybe I can, maybe that's me.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder, we do know the stats. I believe the current stat is that like around 25% of Gen Z identifies as queer. And I think, at least in America, are you Canadian?
I'm Canadian.
Okay. What's it like in Canada? Do you know the stats there?
I think it's pretty similar.
Okay. Yeah. So it makes me think like, now young people have access to the internet. They have access to more representation, books, media. They are, understanding that there's kind of like a super religious sect that like doesn't approve of gay folks and queer folks. And then like young people are a lot more secular. And so there are all these factors that are leading to young people to be out sooner in their lives. Whereas folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they didn't grow up in the same environments that these younger people are growing up in. And I will also go so far as to say that queerness, because a lot of queer folks steer culture and steer slang and the way in which that we are making memes and laughing at jokes, like a lot of queer people and BIPOC folks are responsible for that steering. And so I do think that being queer is quote unquote cooler than it used to be when people in their 30s, 40s, 50s were in school. What do you think about my assessment there?
I think you're totally right. And I think like people can dismiss cool as like, oh, everybody's coming out because it's cool now. But cool is just another word for like social acceptance and belonging. Like you think about like, I don't know, early human beings. Like if you're not accepted in the tribe, like you're out, like in the
Right.
cold. So like when something becomes socially acceptable, that is huge in terms of our feelings of safety and well-being to actually explore something. And I also think about like the youth having greater access. I feel like I always want to be like, and that shit is hard won, and we keep fighting for it because people want to strip that away from us like so hard. Like, just like the increased restrictions on like TikTok and Instagram, like for anything related to LGBTQ plus topics. Like in the past year, I've just watched, like, I'm sure you know, like anybody in the sex ed field or in like the field of queer and trans wellness, like it is an uphill battle. And like, that's because we're doing powerful and like, you know, what's the word? Threatening work, like to these power structures.
Wow. I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. I feel like I got a little bit of a chill. That's right. I mean, I do think that's right, of like kind of destabilizing what folks see as quote unquote the norm, destabilizing the family structure, quote unquote, right? When in reality, if we just like let people be themselves and be in the kind of relationships they want to be in and dress how they want to dress and identify how they are, then things would actually be a lot more peaceful and a lot more loving and a lot more full than just kind of continuously being denied your existence.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, yeah, some of these power structures are no good. Like, it's like, oh, like, it's, I don't know. I know I heard that meme of like when you talk to your grandma about her love story to your grandpa and you're like, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
that sounds like a crime. That doesn't sound like a love story.
Yes. Okay. My friend Melissa Stripe, she's been on the podcast before. She's a comedian, and she said this on one of the episodes, the exact thing you just said. And the impression that she gave of a grandma was like, and he just kept calling and wouldn't stop calling and kept calling.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe that's stalking, Grandma.
And he would come by the high school and he was just so like, it's like, yeah, the way things were, I think needs to change.
Yeah.
Or even like when you think about like, when you have shame about yourself, like that gets passed on onto other people. Like that is where like violence and hatred comes from. So like the more that we can heal ourselves and like, you know, heal from shame, then, you know, the world gets better too.
Hundo P, Eva. Okay, I want to talk about coming out later in life for people, and what kind of this looks like, and I want to get into education around that and stuff. So a question I have is for folks who you work with, because you've worked with, I believe, hundreds now. You have quite a big sample size, speaking of research. What does coming out typically look like for people who come out later in life? Like how is that different from the kinds of coming out narratives for teens maybe that we see depicted in media, or friends who came out in their high school years?
Yeah. So yeah, I see a lot of the experience, and like for myself too, of, like I said, not like being in the closet and repressing and then being like, okay, I'm going to come out, but just really being like, I talk about like, you know, the like escalators in the mall that are like straight, that you're like, okay, plopped on that heterosexual escalator and you just go down that and be like, okay, I guess I'll get a boyfriend. Like, he's nice to be around. Like, I guess I'll get married. And like having a certain point where maybe you see a certain piece of representation that really speaks to you. Maybe you have a friend that like has some open conversations with you. Or, you know, I talk to some people who realize I don't feel excited about getting married, or, you know, something about this marriage isn't working. And there is a reckoning of being like, I need to unpack and look back on my experience and release some shame and unlearn that concept that like maybe I am queer.
Roses wilt, chocolates vanish, but orgasms, they echo. This Valentine's, ditch the cliches and go for the Sona 3 Cruise from Lalo. It uses sonic waves to stimulate the entire clitoris, inside and out, because fun fact, the clit isn't just that little button. It's a whole network of pleasure tissue. Whether you're single, coupled, or somewhere in between, the best relationship you'll ever have starts with your own body. Head to lelo.com and use my stackable code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off. Because love may fade, but great orgasms are forever. Here's something we just don't talk about enough. Pain with sex is super common. Up to 3 out of 4 people with vulvas report pain during intercourse at some point in their lives. That's most of us. And yep, I personally have been there. There are lots of possible causes, and lube isn't a magic cure for everything, but I will say this. Using Uber Lube makes a huge difference for me. It's silicone-based, long-lasting, doesn't get sticky, and it's made with sensitive bodies in mind. It also doesn't stain my sheets or clothes, so it's one less thing to worry about. I literally keep multiple bottles all over my house and the Good To Go Traveler in my toiletry bag because running out is just not an option. If you're ready to bring more comfort and more pleasure into your sex life, go to uberlube.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off. What does it look like for people to start experimenting with their queerness later in life?
Yeah, I think when people think of like experimenting with queerness, the mind immediately goes to like, okay, you're kissing, you're having sex. But like, I know that can be a big part for a lot of people, but in my experience and also like with clients, that more often looks like a very personal experience of being like through the process of compet and feeling ashamed about my queerness. That shame radiated all through different parts of my personality. And now that I can accept and embrace my queerness, kind of like, who am I? Like when I stop myself from being like, oh, I'm like nervous to say this because maybe it'll come off too much, or like maybe somebody will know I'm queer, whether that's a conscious or subconscious idea, that it really looks like getting to know yourself again for the first time. And that might mean, making friends for the first time as your authentic self and being in queer spaces for the first time and exploring with your style for the first time. Be like, okay, what in an embodied way, like how do I actually want to show up in the world as myself? So I think obviously dating can be a part of it, which can be so fun. And like, again, very high school, middle school to be like, oh my God, I'm going to write my barista's name in my journal in a heart every day. I just had my first kiss. But I think it can really be like a very deep internal transformation process.
I like what you said too about the style piece, because I do think that it's hard for people to know what that's like to like have some, if you're not coming out later in life, it's hard for you to understand that like there's so many pieces to this pie of figuring out who you are and your expression, right? Because then we're getting into like gender identity, right? And how that can kind of mix with our romantic or sexual attraction and with our sexual orientation. But yeah, I'm thinking about the genderbread person. Did you teach this in classes, if you were ever a sex educator in classes? Yeah. So the genderbread person, we can put the link of the genderbread person in the show notes, but it's essentially like a full person, a genderbread man person. And essentially it's like thinking about, okay, well, identity is like thinking about how you're dressing and your voice and the thing, the way that you the way that you think about yourself. And then when it comes to your heart, it's like, who are you romantically attracted to? When it comes to your genitals, who like when you look at someone, depending on what their gender identity is or independent of it, do your genitals light up? Intellectually, like what are you thinking with your attraction? And I just love that visual because I think it really helps teach people the differences between these different ways of thinking. And yet the fact that when you are coming out later in life, some of those things can intersect and can feed into each other. And like you said, for your example of your own personal story, how you were also questioning your gender identity. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and how that intersected for you?
Yeah, it's also delights me so much that you brought up the gender bi person because somebody in the Late Bloomers Club Discord literally posted it today.
What? That's
Being
amazing.
like, okay, everybody send your resources on figuring out your gender.
I love it.
We're doing the gender bi person. Yeah, for me, realizing I was not binary really was like unlearning, the expectations around womanhood, that womanhood was, heterosexuality. And was like, okay, I don't think I'm heterosexual. I think I'm a lesbian. And I was like, wait, maybe I'm not a woman either. Like when I start to remove myself from the male gaze or like, needing to engage with men in that way and just getting to be myself, like what does myself actually feel like?
Yeah. And do you have folks in your support group who are also questioning things around their gender as well?
Yeah, and I think it's a similar process of releasing yourself from the male gaze and expectations in that way. And yeah, we've had some conversations about agender, which is a label that I use to describe myself sometimes, which is a feeling like a lack of gender. Like you open the box and there's a big N/A. You're like, I don't feel like a man, don't feel like a woman. And I think that can be like an especially kind of like confusing experience because you're like, what is everybody talking about? Like, am I supposed to feel something? Like, I don't. And you're like, okay, I guess everybody just feels like this when they're a woman. And you're like, nope, actually, like people have a strong sense of like womanhood and like what that means to them and what that feels like internally that you just don't have.
Yeah. Wow. This is really correct conversation. I just love it.
Yay.
This is just exactly what I want to be talking about. Okay, let's transition into dating for folks who come out later in life. As you said, it can be a very personal experience. It can be that you just kind of want to be figuring out who you are. And eventually, most people, do want to date or find partners or companionship or whatever kind of relationship that they want to be in. What are your tips for dating for folks who come out later in life? How do you find your people? How do you get past the embarrassment of feeling like a baby queer, feeling like you're behind in experience? Like, talk to me all about that.
Yeah. So, okay.
Brain blast.
Brain blast. I'm on a big fuck the apps kick because not just because they've gotten so much worse and like just want you to pay for them and are now like hiding your very good matches from you behind a paywall. And for everybody, I think it's gotten more frustrating since dating apps first came out. But I think especially for late bloomers, the stark difference of going on apps for men versus going on apps for queer people can be such a like frustrating and like disheartening mindfuck just because of numbers. Like there are so many more men who want to date women than there are queer people. And when you are in that very vulnerable, like, bubbling stage of your like identity and you go on and you're like, I used to get like X amount of matches per day. Why has nobody swiped on me? Am I not queer enough? Am I not hot in a queer way? Like, what am I doing wrong? And that can just like, I've seen so many clients just absolutely spiral out and like take that experience of dating apps to mean so many things about their identity and their process. When in reality, the biggest thing is it's a numbers thing. Like that is just the reality. And then number two, like it really is like the approaches and I don't want to like gender essentialize or like paint like whole people as like a monolith, but I do think like the approach to dating among queer people is very different than men. Like men are going to send that follow-up. They're going to send that follow-up again. Maybe also in like a gross way where they're like, you haven't replied in 2 hours. I guess you hate me. Fuck you.
Oh God. Yeah.
Like, but queer people are going to do that way less. Like queer people, I find, we got stuff going on. We got busy lives, which sometimes that means ghosting, which I don't think is like, that's also rude. But yeah, it's a different process. So I'm a big proponent of being like, go out to events, go find your hobbies that matter to you, and type in a little Eventbrite or on TikTok, be like, crochet, gay, dodgeball, gay. And like start making friends and community first, which I think is really good for late bloomer well-being. And like,
so
as
nice.
you like go and find those spaces, like that's where your people is going to be. Those are the people you want to date. So like you've narrowed your pool kind of already. And I know that it can take longer than on dating apps. But I think the cost benefit analysis in terms of our like overarching well-being is like more beneficial, because this is I can seriously stop me. This is my soapbox. I'll just keep going and going.
No. Listen, I'm just thinking about how much better. I mean, okay, I have no business giving this advice. I am in a monogamous partnership. I am bisexual, but I am with a man and have been for almost 10 years. And so I feel very much in a different space than what you're describing. However, in my mind, I just think, yes, the apps kind of blow because they're not giving you anything. There's nothing there that other than a face, which I just don't think is what you want to be with. You don't want to be with the face. You want to be with the whole person. And there's just nothing like being in person and feeling that chemistry and feeling like that spark with someone new. You're just like, oh my God, they're in love with me. They're in love with me. Like, and it feels great. It's such a confidence boost to like flirt with people and have a good time. And you don't have to be like the belle of the ball, the, queen of the party. You can just chat with one person and just see what that's like. And just keep showing up, keep going out, even if you don't want to.
I 100% agree. I think, funny that, but I think the like flattening of ourselves to a picture, I think does the person that you're swiping on a disservice. I think it does you a disservice. And I think like the gamification and like dehumanization of that process like takes a toll on our mental health. And that's what I say, that like when you go out, you are getting something back. You are getting an energy back. Whether that's like, I went out to this queer crochet night and I like made a friend. Like that's, maybe you didn't like get somebody's number or like flirt with anybody, but like you are still getting something that fills your cup. Whereas I think dating apps, it is mostly like either quick dopamine, or it is depleting.
Totally.
So
yeah. This is great advice. I would be remiss to not transition a little bit now into pleasure, since that's what this entire Sex Ed with DB season is about. On your site, you say that everyone deserves access to pleasure, and we obviously agree. Love that. And I'm curious, like, what does pleasure mean to you? How do you define pleasure to folks who are working with you on their coming out journeys later in life? What does that look like?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Yeah, I mean, to go back to the genderbread person, I think it really is like your sexual schema or your pleasure schema can be so expansive, like both in terms of eroticism and fantasy, like whether that is arousal, bodily arousal, emotional, like connectiveness, like sensuality, like exploring through our senses. And I think just like play, like rest and play, like kind of the antithesis to like our hustle culture, like producing something, like doing something just because it feels good.
Oh, I feel that so hard. Yes. Yeah, like I really do find pleasure in slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're so encouraged to listen to the podcast on 1.5x speed, book everything every minute of the day, be working, be hustling, and just kind of like making a meal for myself and like
Mm-hmm.
taking time to eat the meal is a
Mm-hmm.
really small but mighty way for me to be giving myself non-sexual pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
The last question before we are going to build our sex toy team is, what is your best advice for people who come out later in life to actually discover their pleasure, sexual pleasure? Like, what are some tactics that people can use to try different types of pleasure for themselves? Like, you know, when we're thinking about how to move past what should be, quote unquote, you know, your pleasure. For example, people who are assigned female at birth expect, oh, a penis in the vagina, it should be pleasurable. And we're all kind of like, we're past that, dude. We're out of there. That's not actually what we need. So what advice do you have for people who are experimenting with new people, new parts, new toys, etc.?
Yeah. Well, I think I always feel like such a fucking sex educator cliche when I'm like communication, which I know
It's true. It's true, though.
That's why we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But I think like especially for late bloomers, like going from a hetero like sex context when you can just follow a script of like what you were given in porn or like what you see in the media, the whole thing would be like, how do lesbians have sex? It's like, so actually, you actually need to think about, what do I like? What does the other person like? And where do we go from there? So having those communication tools to like create more of a DIY experience, and whether that's like love a stoplight system of like green, yellow, red, whether you're using that kind of as like a like boundary check-in beforehand or during, again, like if as a late bloomer you're like having a lot of new experiences and really allowing yourself to be like, let me try something, and if it doesn't work, like we'll pivot to do something else. Maybe I'll come back to try it again in a different context or not. So like having those tools to be like yellow, either to say it or if your partner like can ask it to mean like, let's slow down and like try something else, or like red to be like, let's actually put back on our clothes and have a little sip of water and cuddle.
Yeah. The communication thing, I got lost in thinking about a very hot scene in the show Hacks. Have you seen Hacks?
Oh, okay. I mean, I've seen a clip. I don't know
Have
if
you
that's
seen
the
the clip
hot scene you're talking
of the
about.
3 women making out on a cruise ship? Is that?
I've seen Christina. What is it?
Christina Hendricks be like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna pee on you. She's
Yeah.
like the dominant. That's
Yeah.
also hot. But there's a scene in Hacks. This is no spoiler. It's just a sexy scene that happens where Hannah Einbinder, her character is Ava. And Ava is accompanying her boss on a lesbian cruise ship. And her boss thought it was going to be a gay man cruise ship because lesbians hate her. So that's a plot point. So, but what ends up happening is Ava finds these 2 very sexy lesbian women who are a couple who are kind of looking for their third. And long story short, there's a very sexy scene on a cruise ship where they're all sitting together and they like just took Molly, whatever. They're like partying, they're dancing, they're drinking. And Ava has like a small bruise on her leg. And one of the characters is like, oh, that's a nasty bruise. Do you want me to kiss it for you? And that's kind of what starts their like makeout. And then she rudely gets interrupted mid makeout by her boss, and they have been ejected from the ship. But nonetheless, the communication piece, right, of like something can be so small and really sexy of like, oh, like your shoulder's looking like really bare. Like, can I like cover it with my mouth? Like something just really simple, and just the way that we talk to each other, it might like feel embarrassing, but if we're with the right person and there's trust, even if you're not getting married to this person, if it's just someone who you have a baseline level of trust, respect, communication, asking questions can be such a simple way to figure out what is sexy for the other person and giving them pleasure, and they do the same for you. And like communication is exactly what that was your first tip, which again got lost in lesbian threesome. But yeah, very, very simple but effective piece of advice.
I think too, like we can have this idea of like, oh, like either you're a good communicator or you're not, but just like everything, it's a skill. Like you can learn like different scripts, like you can learn how to feel more confident and do it in your style, even if it feels overwhelming, like initially.
Yes, 100%. Mm-hmm. Eva, we've reached the end where we're going to make our sex toy team. Very simply put, I want to know from you, like, what makes great queer sex toys? What are some brands that you love for inclusion, gender neutral language, great design, make people of all genders and all genitals feel good? Tell me everything.
Oh my gosh, I have just like a pile of sex toys from like various sponsored and gifted things in my office.
That's so good.
And so the one that's here that I think of is the brand Wet for Her.
Ooh, tell me more.
Which is created by lesbians for sapphic people. And they have like the softest toys ever. They're like so soft and squishy, but also firm enough to like exist in a harness and like use for strap on. And and you can like bend them for like different, positions that feel good in your body. So yeah, that comes to mind.
Love it. Are there any harness companies that you recommend?
Yeah, one that immediately comes to mind is New York Toy Collective, which also has different gender gear harnesses as well as different dildos and strap-ons. So really a one-stop shop. I'm in Toronto, and we have a very cool queer and trans like co-op sex toy establishment here called Come As You Are. And yeah,
do you know Luna Matatas also?
I do know Luna Matatas.
Oh my god. I just saw her at the Climax conference in Ottawa. And she is the best human being ever. Love her so much.
She is. She really is.
One-stop shop. I also want to talk about lingerie really quickly. I recently worked with an amazing company called Blue Bella, and they have very sexy, very like high quality. It just feels so good. There are so many different kinds of lingerie, and would highly recommend checking them out, Blue Bella, because depending on how you want to express your identity and your romance and your curves or not curves of your body, lingerie and different outfits could be really fun. Could be fun for role play, could be fun to put on for 2 minutes and then rip off. So yeah, highly recommend them. And yeah, one of our longtime sponsors, people on this podcast will not be surprised, but the Magic Wand. I just think it's like my personal favorite toy. And I just think it gives people so much pleasure, and I just love it. So always recommend that whenever we're making a sex toy team.
I love that. My girlfriend and I last night did a little actual massage
with the wand. I mean, that's what it also is used for, is a legit massage, because it's quite powerful.
Exactly. I was like, my roommates definitely think we're fucking right now. But
alas, that's their problem.
That's their problem.
Eva, you are so wonderful. You are such a warm spirit. And I have loved getting to know you and have loved talking to you about all things late bloomer queerness and pleasure, and really like feeling at home and comfortable in your body and mind. That's really what this is all about. So thank you so much for being here today. This has been so fantastic.
Thanks so much, Danielle. This has been such a beautiful, fulfilling conversation. Yeah, so wonderful.
Oh, I'm so glad. Welcome to The Afterglow, where we wind things down, reflect on big takeaways, and leave you with one juicy thing to try, think about, or explore before next week. It was so wonderful talking to Eva Bloom about what it's like to be a late bloomer queer person. It is always so refreshing hearing actual stories from real queer people, especially since media narratives around queerness have some specific tropes that aren't really what define who we are as queer people. And so often we see coming out as one big moment, but like Eva says, coming out is something that can happen over and over, especially as your identities grow and change with you. You come out to yourself, you come out to your friends, you might come out to your family or your coworkers, and then you find yourself coming out every time someone assumes that you're cis or heterosexual. Coming out is often a lifelong occurrence and not just one moment. And coming out is something usually attributed to teens. Until recently, most first queer experience stories are about teenagers, everything from Heartstopper to Call Me By Your Name to, of course, one of my favorites, Degrassi. But with shows like Heated Rivalry, not to talk about it for the millionth time, but I will, we are getting more and more depictions of coming to terms with your queerness a little later in life. And that's so important because realizing you're not straight or not cis well after your teens is completely normal. Comp het is powerful. Straightness is baked into so much of how we live and how we view the world, at least it is in the States. But our world largely revolves around the nuclear family, and that's why. Specifically with one father and one mother. But that's not how many of us live. Even for those of us who do, it's not an indication that we are straight. Bisexuals exist, and we do not stop being bisexual when we have partners of another gender. So if you're coming to terms with your queerness later in life, remember, this is normal, you are not alone, and you have a community of people who will support you. Like Eva said, there really isn't gatekeeping around identities in most queer spaces, especially in real life versus online. Instead, you'll probably find plenty of people with experiences just like yours. And congratulations on finally getting to meet the real you. Here is your pleasure practice of the week. This week, slow it way down. Find an activity that you enjoy, but typically rush through, like a podcast or a YouTube video, a crossword puzzle, a book, anything. Instead of trying to get it done so quickly so you can fit more into your busy day, let this one activity fill the space instead. Grab a coffee or tea or hot chocolate or a wine, maybe a little snack, and try to engage with what you're doing on an attentive sensory level. What are all the sounds that you can hear from the audio of a video or a podcast to the fridge humming or the wind outside? What can you smell right now? What different layers of flavor can you taste? And what does every single moment, word, scene, or anything else mean in what you are engaging with? Allowing us to slow down and really understand our senses can really help us when we're thinking about what we like, who we are, how we identify, what labels do and don't feel good to us. So start with slowing way down. And again, here's another reminder to fill out that audience survey for a chance to win $50 cash, and it's anonymous. Thank you so much for listening. Love y'all. Talk to you next week.